Desmond Miles, a bartender, is kidnapped by the company Abstergo Industries for use as a test subject in the Animus, a device that can simulate genetic memory. Abstergo intends to put Desmond in the device to recall the memories of his ancestor, Altair ibn Lahad, a member of the Assassin Brotherhood in the year 1191, who lived during the Third Crusade in the Holy Land. Raised to be an assassin from birth, Altair became a master assassin at age 25, an accomplishment unheard of for one so young. We see Desmond entering Altair's memory, but he soon faces synchronization problems. On this, Lucy Stillman and Warren Viddick's voices can be heard. These are two people who work for Abstergo Industries and are seen as basically the villains. However, we learn that Lucy's loyalty to Abstergo is questionable. Lucy adds that Desmond has to relive key moments of Altair's life to increase his synchronization, before reaching the final memory, which holds the information that Abstergo is seeking. This is the whole point in the Animus. This is why they put Desmond in there, to find some information hidden within his ancestors' memories hundreds of years ago. After Desmond is done with the tutorial, he enters the closest synchronizable memory of Altair. Altair is first shown attempting to retrieve one of a series of artifacts known as the Pieces of Eden from Solomon's Temple with the help of Malik al-Saif, his brother Kadar, and they are stopped by Robert de Sable, Grand Master of the Knights Templar and sworn enemy of the Assassins. While retrieving the treasure, Altair breaks all three tenets of the Assassin's Creed in an attempt to kill Robert, but he ultimately fails. In the following commotion, Malik's brother is killed, and Malik's left arm is crippled and later amputated. When Altair returns to the Assassin's stronghold at Masyaf with apologies, Malik, who survived de Sable, comes back with the artifact and disparages Altair because of his arrogance. After narrowly defeating a retaliatory attack by the Templars, Al-Mualim, leader of the Assassins, demotes Altair to a novice, but gives him another chance to rise through the ranks of the Brotherhood. Al-Mualim assigns Altair the task of assassinating 9 key figures across the Holy Land in Jerusalem, Acre, and Damascus, aiming to bring peace between the Crusader and Saracen forces. Each target is based on an actual historical figure from the real-life Third Crusade. Tamir, an arms merchant in Damascus selling weapons to both the Crusaders and the Saracens. Garnier de Nablu, the leader of the Knights Hospitalier, who conducts mind-altering experiments on patients at his hospital in Acre. Talal, the leader of a gang of slavers in Jerusalem. Abul Nuqad, a pompous trader and regent of Damascus, stealing money intended to fund the war. William V, Marquess of Montferrat, Acre's cruel and abusive regent. Mahed ad-Din, a tyrant who rules Jerusalem through fear by holding public executions. Master Sibrand, the paranoid leader of the Knights Teutonic, who plans to betray the Crusaders by blocking the ports of Acre. Jabaya al-Hakim, a scholar using his position to seize and destroy all written knowledge in Damascus. And Robert de Sable, the Grand Master of the Templars, who has been taking advantage of the Crusade to further his order's ideological goals. Altair completes each task, learning how each target is connected to Robert and the Templars and how together they aim to end the Crusades and to place the Holy Land under their own control. During Altair's assassination attempt on Robert, Altair is tricked with a decoy, a Templar named Maria Thorpe. Maria reveals that Robert had anticipated the assassins would come after him and went to negotiate an alliance between the Crusaders and Saracens against them. Sparing Maria's life, Altair confronts Robert in the camp of King Richard I and exposes his crimes. Unsure of who to believe, Richard suggests a duel to determine the truth, remarking that God will decide the victor. After Altair mortally wounds him, Robert identifies Al-Mualim as the final conspirator, revealing that he had betrayed the assassins all along. Altair discovers that Al-Mualim was himself a member of the Templars and used the assassins to kill the other members who held the secret to the treasure's power so that he could selfishly keep the artifact for himself. Altair quickly returns to Masyaf and approaches his master, who reveals the truth to him. The Piece of Eden, which he had recovered through the help of Altair directly before his transgression, creates illusions. He denounces religion and other seemingly supernatural events, for example the 10 plagues of Egypt, the parting of the Red Sea, and the presence of the Greek gods in the Trojan War, as illusions caused by the piece, and then states his intention to use the artifact to compel mankind into a brainwashed state, and in doing so, bringing an end to all conflict. Altair is eventually able to see through the deceptions created by the artifact to kill Al-Mualim. When Altair recovers the artifact, the Piece of Eden activates, showing a holographic view of the world with numerous locations of other Pieces of Eden marked across the globe. This view, this globe, is exactly what Vidic and Abstergo were trying to find by putting Desmond into the Animus. When the process is complete, Desmond learns that Abstergo is a modern-day front of the Templars, and they are already seeking other artifacts at locations identified in Altair's memories. Further, he learns that the modern-day assassins had tried to rescue him before the memory had completed but had failed. Following this, Desmond was to be killed after an order from a high-ranking Templar, Alan Rickon, but Lucy Stillman saves him from death and, at one point, tucks her ring finger into her palm, referring to the assassin's tradition of cutting off the finger. Though Desmond remains trapped in the Abstergo laboratory, his experience in the Animus has created a bleeding effect of Altair's life in his own, allowing Desmond to use Altair's eagle vision, which, in turn, allows him to see strange messages painted on the walls of his room and the floor of the lab. The messages all deal with various forms of the end of the world from different cultures, including several references to 21st of December 2012, the date that Abstergo plans to launch a satellite that will permanently end the war. It is hinted that this method would be by the same method that Al-Mualim hypnotized Masyaf, only on a larger scale. Finally, the game ends with Desmond wondering what the images all mean and who could have drawn them. Assassin's Creed 2 begins with Desmond giving a brief monologue about the events of the first game and his current predicament. A few hours after the events of Assassin's Creed, in the year 2012, Desmond Miles touches upon how he was held prisoner by the modern-day Knights Templar, Abstergo Industries, and was being forced to relive the genetic memories of his ancestor, Altair ibn Lahad, in order to aid Abstergo in discovering the location of artifacts, known collectively as the Pieces of Eden. Due to the bleeding effect, Desmond has gained eagle vision, enabling him to see a variety of messages and symbols written in blood in his bedroom wall by its former occupant, known only as Subject 16. While staring at the message, former employee and researcher of Abstergo, Lucy Stillman, arrives, covered in blood, and frees Desmond from the room. He then re-enters the Animus briefly and watches the birth of Ezio Auditore de Firenze as she makes a copy of the files located within the machine. The two then escape after a brief scuffle with the company's security guards and arrive at a warehouse in which Lucy and two other modern-day assassins, Sean Hastings and Rebecca Crane, have set up their own base of operations, complete with their own version of an Animus. Desmond is asked by Lucy to enter their version of the Animus and relive the genetic memory of his ancestor, Ezio Auditore de Firenze, in order to continue the search for the remaining Pieces of Eden before Abstergo locates them. Due to the number in the Assassin's Order seriously dwindling, Lucy informs Desmond that she intends to train Desmond in the various skills needed to become an assassin by exploiting the bleeding effect and having Desmond absorb Ezio's abilities. 1476. Ezio, living in Italy during the Renaissance, is approximately 17 when he discovers that his family was betrayed by a close friend of his father's in the midst of a political coup d'etat. Ezio's father's final instructions lead him to a hidden room in the family home with a chest containing the clothing and weapons of an assassin. Ezio is ultimately unable to save his two brothers and father from the betrayer, and all three are falsely convicted of treason. After evacuating their home and sharing a brief accommodation with the family's housemaid's sister, who teaches Ezio some survival techniques, he brings his panicked sister and muted mother to the family's countryside villa, where they are given shelter by Ezio's uncle Mario, who begins training Ezio to become an assassin. Mario also provides information and leads on the conspirators involved in his family's betrayal, which becomes a trail stretching from Florence to Venice and eventually the Vatican. During his travels, Ezio befriends several citizens of Italy who aid him in his pursuit for revenge, including a young Leonardo da Vinci, who travels and decodes pages of Altair's codex, enabling Ezio to gain new weapons and assassination skills. Ezio begins slowly locating and assassinating the conspirators involved, and is ultimately able to identify Rodrigo Borgia as the Grand Master of the Italian Templars, whose main goal is to take control of all Italy. Ezio tracks Rodrigo to Venice and discovers that he has obtained a piece of Eden known as the Apple, an artifact similar to the one that Altair possessed almost 3 centuries prior, the one that we saw in the previous game. Rodrigo has been researching the knowledge surrounding the pieces of Eden extensively, and believes himself to be a prophet named in the documentation of the artifacts, which would ultimately lead him and other Templars to a location known as the Vault, which is believed to contain powerful information and more pieces of Eden. Ezio and Rodrigo duel, and when Ezio gains the upper hand, guards appear and begin to move the fight into the favour of Rodrigo. The allies that Ezio has made over the years arrive shortly after, and they defeat Rodrigo, who flees for fear of his life, leaving the apple behind. The allies and friends of Ezio finally reveal their common trait, that they are all members of the Assassins, including the great Niccolo Machiavelli. They induct Ezio into the Order, informing him that they believe him to be the actual prophet who will lead the Assassins, not the Templars, to the Vault. Desmond takes short breaks from the Animus, and during one he is tested by Lucy to see if the bleeding effect has been working. Desmond is able to demonstrate all of Ezio's skills, indicating that he has absorbed years' worth of abilities in only a matter of hours. During this break, however, Desmond suffers a strange hallucination, which returns him to the body of Altair in Acre. During the memory, Altair makes love to Maria Thorpe, an ex-Templar, and Desmond is confused to find that after Altair leaves, the memory stays behind with Maria. Throughout the genetic memories as Ezio, Desmond discovers multiple glyphs placed on various landmarks that are only visible to someone using the Animus. The glyphs are found to be the same ones drawn on Desmond's bedroom wall in Abstergo, and analysis reveals that they contain computer code hidden within the Animus. It is ultimately discovered that Subject 16 hacked the Animus and placed the glyphs within the memories himself, which were carried over to the new Animus when Lucy loaded the information she had recovered at Abstergo. Each glyph contained a great number of historical artworks, photographs and messages past and present, implicating a great number of prominent events and figures with the Templars and pieces of Eden. Each also contained a puzzle of some sort, which, when solved, contained clips of a larger video. The clips, however, are short and out of sequence. After locating and solving all 20 glyphs, the video is revealed. The video begins with the Abstergo logo shown above the title, Subject 16, Subject 12, Classified Date BCE. The video follows a man and a woman who call each other by the names of Adam and Eve, running through a strangely modern and futuristic world, apparently being chased by someone or something. They pass through a complex where workers are busy building more pieces of Eden and climb to the roof. Eve holds up the apple and the video suddenly ends with a flash of binary code that translates to Eden. Desmond returns to the Animus, and the team finds that many of the following memories are corrupted. They are able to begin again, but only years after the fight between the Assassins and Rodrigo. The memories restart in 1499, and the team discovers that the latter gained influence and power in the Catholic Church, ultimately being elected Pope as Alexander VI. Ezio and his allies have searched long and hard and collected all 30 pages of the Codex, discovering through it that the vault lies in Rome, specifically underneath the Vatican. They realise that the papal staff is another piece of Eden, and Rodrigo is hoping to use it to achieve access to the vault. Ezio travels to the Vatican and attempts to assassinate Rodrigo, who uses the staff against Ezio, who retaliates with the apple. During the ensuing battle, Ezio is stabbed and Rodrigo escapes with both pieces of Eden. Ezio then chases after him and finds Rodrigo trying to open the vault in vain. The two fight once more and Rodrigo finally falls. However, Ezio refuses to kill him, insisting that he has killed enough in his life and the continued deaths will not reverse the fate of his family. Ezio proves himself to be the prophet when in his hands, the apple and staff open the vault. Inside the vault, he finds not pieces of Eden, but an empty room and a holographic figure named Minerva. She claims that she brought Ezio to her so that almost 600 years later, Desmond and his allies would hear her words through the Animus. Minerva explains that she and her race were part of an advanced society that settled on Earth before a celestial event destroyed most of the life on Earth. Before the disaster that befell them, the members of her species created humans and used them as a race for workforce. However, humanity rebelled against their creators and initiated a long-spanning war. Ultimately, the humans seemingly won, but then the catastrophe occurred, wiping out many humans and the precursor race. Of those remaining, the two species worked to recreate the world, before the advanced race sealed themselves in temples around the world, hoping to prevent the same disaster that had destroyed most of their kind from happening once again. As Minerva finishes, she speaks to Desmond directly by name, and informs him that she has done all she needs, and that the rest remains up to him and his allies. The memory ends, and Desmond awakens in the present to find that Abstergo has located and began attacking the assassins as Sean and Rebecca pull him out of the Animus. Desmond is given a hidden blade by Lucy, and the two run downstairs to stop the guards as Sean and Rebecca pack up their equipment. With the skills he absorbed from Ezio, Desmond is able to dispatch the forces that have been sent against them, and he discovers Warren Vidic standing at the back of the truck. He sarcastically tells Desmond to enjoy his temporary victory, and the truck drives away. From there, Sean and Rebecca finish gathering the equipment, and Lucy assures Desmond that Vidic will get what he deserves. The group vacates the hideout and attempts to find a new safe house where, according to Lucy, they should be safe for some time. As they drive, Lucy prepares to review the tapes of Desmond's latest session, noting how the situation has escalated dramatically and how Minerva's words proved everything she was afraid of. She theorizes that Minerva was discussing the Earth's geomagnetic reversal, which could have detrimental effects on the planet. Rebecca prepares the Animus for Desmond to re-enter, as Lucy speculates there may be more to discover in his memories. Using the Animus 2.0, Desmond Miles attempted to relive one of the later memories of his ancestor, Ezio Auditore, hoping that it would reveal the location of his supernatural Apple of Eden artifact, which could allow them to prevent the foretold world-ending disaster in the present day. However, instead of entering the memory set in 1506, he was forced into a different memory, occurring during a battle in Viana. From there, as Ezio looked upon the besieged Viana castle, he recalled the similar events of the siege of Monteriggioni, subsequently forcing Desmond back further into a memory from 1499. Right after the previous game, Assassin's Creed 2, as Ezio left the vault beneath the Vatican after listening to Minerva's message, he discovered that Rodrigo Borgia was gone. Noticing too that the staff had been left behind, he attempted to extract it from where it had been impaled into the floor. However, it descended and was sealed away. Mario Auditore then called down to him from the entrance, and he and Ezio fought their way out of the Vatican. Ezio, unable to decide whether or not to cast the apple into the Tiber River, gave it to Mario for safekeeping. The two then rode back to Monteriggioni on horseback. However, Ezio soon learned that the Templar threat had diminished little when Cesare Borgia, son of Rodrigo Borgia, laid siege to Monteriggioni. Cesare's army of soldiers, towers and cannons attacked in full force, destroying much of the city and villa. The attack ended with Monteriggioni in ruins, Ezio wounded, and Mario killed by Cesare himself. Though Ezio attempted to follow his uncle's murderer on horseback, he passed out on the road to Rome from his injuries. At that point, Desmond woke from the Animus, stationed in the back of the assassin's van, them having arrived at the Villa Auditore in modern-day Monteriggioni, their last safe house in Italy. Lucy Stillman explained that they need to recover Ezio's Apple of Eden, as she suspected that Minerva had altered it somehow when she had touched it in the vault. Desmond, Lucy, Sean and Rebecca then headed for the villa, seeking the safety of the underground sanctuary, which would keep them hidden from Abstergo's cell towers. However, as the door was locked, Desmond and Lucy left to discover another way in. After making their way through the secret passage that Ezio and the citizens had used to flee the Borgia attack, they opened the way for Sean and Rebecca. Inside the sanctuary, Desmond saw an aged Ezio due to the bleeding effect and deduced that he must have returned to the villa many years after the attack, though for an unknown purpose. He also found a symbol that Ezio had drawn on the wall and, using eagle vision, saw a series of numbers hidden underneath. The four of them then set up the Animus 2.0, and Desmond returned to Ezio's memories, with Lucy believing that improving his synchronization with Ezio would allow Desmond to access the memory revealing the location of the apple. Ezio regained consciousness in a small house in Rome, where the woman who had been tending to him told him that a man had brought him there, and had supplied him with new armour and clothing. After leaving the house and receiving medicine from a doctor, Ezio left to meet Machiavelli. Through Machiavelli, he discovered that Rome was in despair, and that the citizens were being oppressed by the Borgia. Basing himself on the Tiber Island in the centre of the city, Ezio began his mission to rid the city of the influence of Caesar and his generals. To do so, Ezio re-established relationships between his Assassin's Guild and the other guilds in the city, namely that of the courtesans, led by Madonna Solari and later Claudio Altair, the thieves, led by La Volpe, and the mercenaries, led by Bartolomeo d'Alviano. Ezio then began to rebuild the Brotherhood by recruiting apprentices, who were made up of both distressed citizens who wished to liberate their city and young novice assassins. After the recruits had completed their training, he placed them in teams and sent them on missions across Europe. Ezio then began to break down the Borgia influence in Rome by destroying several Borgia towers and their captains. He also sabotaged Caesar's forces by striking at their arsenal, their military funding, and their support from the French forces. To do so, he destroyed the war machines of Leonardo da Vinci and assassinated two of Caesar's key generals, his banker, Juan Borgia, and the French general, Octavien de Valois. Afterwards, he was informed that Pietro Rossi, an actor and Lucretia Borgia's plaything, possessed a key to the Castle St. Angelo. Knowing that he would need it in order to assassinate Caesar and Rodrigo successfully, Ezio tailed after Micheletto Corella, Caesar's personal assassin, who had been sent to kill Pietro. After Ezio had rescued him, both from being stabbed with the spear during his play and from the elements of poison, Pietro handed the assassin the key to the Castello. Upon completion of these tasks, Ezio inducted Claudia into the Assassin Order, and was elected by Machiavelli to be the new mentor of the Italian assassins. Soon afterwards, Ezio infiltrated the castle, where he witnessed the murder of Rodrigo by his son, Caesar. Caesar forced the location of the Apple of Eden from Lucretia, and hurried to retrieve it from Basilica di San Pietro. However, Ezio successfully reached the apple before Caesar, and subsequently used it to demilitarize the remnants of Caesar's army. In one last battle, Ezio and his fellow assassins fought Caesar and his surviving men at the gates of Rome. Caesar was arrested by Fabio Orsini by the order of the new pope, though not before commenting that he would not be in chains for long, and that he would never be killed by any man. Afterwards, Ezio brought up Caesar's remarks with Leonardo since he was worried by them. Leonardo suggested utilizing the apple to see if what Caesar had stated was accurate. After some hesitation, Ezio decided to follow his advice and found that Caesar would really be released from prison. Ezio declared that he needed to leave at once, reassuring Leonardo's concerns for the assassin guild he was leaving behind by saying, "I built this brotherhood to last, with or without me." In 1507, Ezio finally tracked Caesar down at the Siege of Viana, Spain. Ezio fought through the infantry and finally managed to corner Caesar on the castle wall. There, in a climactic battle, Ezio managed to destroy Caesar's armour and ultimately defeat him. Though Caesar insisted he would not die in the hands of man, Ezio then left him to the hands of fate and threw him from the battlements to his death. Afterwards, Ezio took the Apple of Eden into a vault under the Santa Maria Araccioli, within the Temple of Juno. Desmond emerged from the Animus shortly after reliving this memory, listening to his teammates deducing a way to get into the vault. Just as Rebecca mentioned that they needed a spoken password to enter it, a blackout occurred, cutting them off from using the Animus to find it. However, Desmond realised that the symbol he had seen on the door of the vault was the same one he had seen drawn on the villa wall. Sean discovered that the sequence of numbers hidden behind the symbol referred to the 72 names of God, setting the password to be 72. The assassins then drove to the Colosseum in Rome, and Desmond separated from the others to find a way into the vault. As he travelled the underground passageway, he encountered another of those who came before from the ancient civilization, Juno, who spoke at length of the downfall of humankind. Arriving inside the Santa Maria Aracciali, Desmond unlocked the door for his teammates and, shortly afterwards, witnessed a memory of Ezio free-running through the church. He followed him and activated a system of bars and levers, finally causing a small pedestal to emerge from the floor. Placing his hand on it, Desmond activated the floor, lowering the four of them down into the door of the vault. Desmond spoke the password and the door opened to reveal a large empty chamber with a tall platform raised in the middle, upon which the apple awaited. Desmond activated the staircase up to it by jumping across a series of pillars, while Juno's voice echoed through the cavern as she spoke cryptically of humans, the pieces of Eden, and a sixth sense. However, Desmond was apparently the only one who could hear her. Once the assassins had access to the platform, Desmond touched the apple and a series of holographic symbols appeared. Sean mentioned that two of the most distinct ones, the Parisian cap and the Masonic eye, only came together in one place. However, when Desmond picked up the apple, time seemed to stop and he found himself controlled by Juno. Though he struggled, she forced him to draw his hidden blade and stab Lucy in the abdomen. The two then fell to the ground unconscious, with blood pooling from Lucy. Later, William Miles and Harlan T. Cunningham could be heard speaking, saying that Desmond had gone into shock. William ordered Harlan to put Desmond back into the Animus, despite Harlan's protests on how badly the Animus had affected Desmond already. Desmond had entered a coma, though William claimed that Desmond would live through it. After the events of the Colosseum Vault, which resulted in Lucy Stillman's death, Desmond Miles entered a comatose state and awoke in the Animus's Black Room. Within the Black Room, Desmond met the virtual construct of Abstergo's 16th test subject, Clay Kaczmarek, who explained that in order for Desmond to regain his consciousness, he must relive the remaining memories of his ancestor, Ezio Auditore da Firenze, until a sync nexus triggered. In March of 1511, Ezio travelled to Masyaf after he discovered a letter by his late father regarding the secret library of the assassin mentor Altair ibn Lahad that was rumoured to contain his invaluable knowledge hidden beneath the old assassin fortress. There, he was greeted by a battalion of Templars led by Leandros. He later found the entrance to the library, but learned that it needed special keys in order for it to be unlocked. The hired worker that was present in the antechamber to the library mentioned to Ezio that the Templars found one of the keys beneath the Ottoman Sultan's palace, while speculating that the book held by Leandros would lead them to the others. With this in mind, Ezio set out of the fortress to take the book from Leandros and eventually killed the Templar captain at Atlas village after a long chase. After obtaining the book, Ezio set out for Constantinople, where the rest of the keys were hidden. By May, Ezio had arrived at Constantinople and was greeted by the leader of the local guild, Yusuf Tazim. Yusuf gave Ezio a tour of the city, introducing him to the guild and showing what was left of the Byzantine Empire within the city. After helping the guild recruit a few new initiates and being taught how to use bombs, Ezio went to the first location of the keys, now a bookshop owned by Sophia Sartor. After an introduction, Ezio found an entrance to the Yerebatan cistern, where he found the first key along with a tome of an encrypted map that led to rare books which held the location of other keys. Striking up a mutual agreement, Ezio made a promise with Sophia. If she helped decipher the map, he would let her borrow and print a few copies of the books. In the midst of his search, Ezio helped Yusuf save the Ottoman prince from a planned assassination, which earned him the favour of the prince, Suleiman I. Following this, Ezio later met with Suleiman in order to learn of the perpetrator behind the attack, whom they suspected was the Janissary captain, Tariq Barletti. Tailing Tariq, Ezio soon found out that the man had dealings with Manuel Palaiologos, the former heir of the Byzantine throne. With this knowledge, Suleiman requested that Ezio assassinate Tariq. However, in his dying moment, Tariq revealed that his forces were to ambush Manuel after gaining his favour. Before dying, Tariq entrusted Ezio to continue his plan and set sail for Cappadocia. In between his tasks for Solomon, Ezio continually searched for the books with Sophia's help. With each book, he was able to retrieve one of the keys from one of the many secret locations, and with each one he was able to relive some key moments of Altair's life. The first key showed his heroic efforts in 1190, where Altair saved Masyaf from an attack by the traitor Haras. The second key detailed his mentor Al-Mualim's pyre and Abbas Sophian's failed rebellion through utilising an Apple of Eden, which Altair later retrieved. The third memory detailed Altair's fall from power in 1228. After defeating Genghis Khan's army with his son Darim and his wife Maria, Altair found out that Abbas had usurped command from Altair's appointed proxy Malik al-Sayf, and that his son Seth was murdered by Swami, Abbas's right-hand man. Altair confronted Abbas and his loyalists, but was overcome with rage and used the apple for revenge, which ultimately caused the death of both Swami and Maria. In the wake of this incident, Altair left Masyaf with Darim before Abbas could apprehend them. The fourth key showed Altair's return to power in 1247. He achieved this through Abbas's death at his hands, where Altair used his newly crafted hidden gun. All the while reliving Ezio's last memories, Desmond also relived his own memories in a very different simulation, wherein he reached the core of the Animus. There, a recollection of his life was told. Ezio arrived at Cappadocia by March 1512. There, he met with Tarik's informant, Dilara. Dilara was eventually captured after she and Ezio parted ways. With haste, Ezio rescued Dilara and managed to cause an explosion that ensued enough chaos to draw out Manuel Palaiologos. The assassin then managed to corner Manuel after a long chase and killed him before he could escape by the city's inner harbour. As a result, Ezio managed to obtain the last key from Manuel. Just then, Ezio saw Prince Ahmet on a ship with the Byzantines. Ahmet revealed his true role as the Byzantines' Templars leader. There, he threatened Ezio into handing over the key, and after the assassin's refusal, Ahmet threatened to hold Sophia Sartor captive. Despite Ezio's warnings, Ahmet went ahead and set sail back to Constantinople. Hurriedly, Ezio escaped the burning city and made his way back to his boat, and on the way back, he relived the fifth key's memory of Altair's life. The fifth key revealed Altair's twilight years in 1257. Niccolo and Maffeo Polo were preparing to leave for Constantinople to establish a guild after their stay in Masyaf. Altair gave the brothers his codex as a parting gift and escorted them out of the city with Darim, defeating any Mongol who drew near by using his Apple of Eden. As the brothers left on their horses, Altair gave him the keys, which he asked to be hidden from others, so that the one who was meant to know the message could seek it out. Ezio later returned to Constantinople, hurriedly making his way to Sophia's bookshop. There he found a platoon of assassins dead, as well as Yusuf. Filled with rage at the slaughter, Ezio made his way to the harbour of Theodosius. Ahmet had one of his men hold Sophia by the edge of the Galata Tower. Pressured into decision, Ezio gave the keys to Ahmet and went to Sophia's rescue. However, the woman was only a decoy, and the real Sophia was about to be hanged somewhere else. Ezio hurriedly made his way to her, managing to save her just in time. As Sophia recovered, Ezio watched as Ahmet's carriage left the city, before he spurred himself and Sophia into one of their own to give chase. Fortunately, Ezio managed to catch up to Ahmet by the city's countryside, eventually causing his carriage to fall, along with Ahmet and himself. The assassin then retrieved the keys while contemplating what to do with Ahmet. As he did, however, Ahmet's brother, Selim I, arrived with a platoon of Ottoman guards and janissaries. Selim then murdered his brother by pushing him off a nearby cliff. Meeting with Ezio, Selim went on to threaten that Ezio be killed if he returned to Constantinople, sparing him only due to Suleiman's good word. After returning to Animus Island one last time, Desmond became witness to the Animus's scheduled deletion, seeing everything dissolve in front of him. Clay, knowing full well what was going on, embraced Desmond one last time and then pushed him back into the digital portal, saving him from being deleted by sacrificing himself. Desmond hesitantly left Clay and the island and relived the last of Ezio's memories. Ezio and Sophia arrived at Masyaf. There, Ezio reflected upon his life and decided to retire after learning the contents of the library to spend the rest of his time with Sophia. Arriving at the library's door, Ezio utilised the 5 keys and managed to solve the puzzle etched into it before he made his way inside and soon found the library. void of books except for the seated remains of Altair. His corpse held one last key, where his last major memory was imprinted. By the end of 1257, Altair had emptied the fortress and had all of his assassins dispersed. Meeting with Darren one last time, Altair ordered him to leave so that the fortress would be empty when the Mongols returned, him staying within the library along with the apple. Embracing his son one last time, Altair locked himself in the library and then placed the apple on a pedestal. The assassin then sat on one of the chairs, holding his last key, and imprinted his memory before dying at the age of 92. After reliving Altair's final memory, Ezio went to inspect the Mentor's Apple of Eden by the pedestal, though he decided it best for the piece of Eden to stay where it was, before finally laying down his arms as a sign of retirement. There, the apple activated as Ezio called out to Desmond. The assassin admitted and accepted his existence as a conduit for a message not meant for him, asking Desmond to make the bloodshed in his life mean something. As an apparition of Desmond appeared, Ezio reached out for him, triggering the Sync Nexus. Within the Nexus, Desmond met Jupiter. There, the ultimate fate of the first civilization was revealed. There, people had several temples built to study ways on how to save themselves from the coming great calamity about to occur. Each temple tried different methods in stopping the event, and had their data subsequently transmitted to the Grand Temple. Despite their efforts, their methods proved to be ineffective, which eventually caused the downfall of their civilization, bringing them to near extinction as well as humanity. Jupiter then showed the location of the Grand Temple to Desmond, which was in New York. Jupiter, along with Minerva and Juno, entrusted Desmond to stop the coming of the second catastrophe. After hearing the words of Jupiter, Desmond awoke from his coma and was greeted by his father, Rebecca, and Sean. As he stood up, Desmond assured the team of what he needed to do. The team then exited the van and made their way to the Grand Temple. Assassin's Creed 3 begins in the present day with Desmond, his father William, Rebecca Crane, and Sean Hastings finding the Grand Temple in a cave in Turin, New York. Using Ezio's Apple of Eden to access the structure, Desmond activates a large portion of the equipment as well as a timer indicating when the second disaster is predicted to occur on December 1st, 2012. His mind then falls into a fugue state in which he relives some significant memories of his ancestor, Haytham Kenway. 1754. During a production at the London Theatre Royal, Haytham murders a man named Miko and steals a medallion which he and his associates believe allow access to a storehouse for those who came before. After Haytham returns with the medallion, he is dispatched to the British-American colonies to find the storehouse. Haytham arrives in Boston. There he is tasked with gathering together 5 men faithful to his cause: Charles Lee, William Johnson, Thomas Hickey, Benjamin Schertz, and Jonathan Pitcairn. In the process, he kills a slave trader named Silas Thatcher and frees a large group of Native American tribespeople, believing it will make them amicable to his cause. One of these Native American tribespeople, Canetio, agrees to help Haytham find the storehouse on the condition that he kill General Edward Braddock, the man responsible for enslaving her people. After tracking his movements, Haytham slays Braddock. Haytham and Canetio then travel to the entrance of the Grand Temple, only to find the medallion Haytham possesses cannot open it. At that moment, the pair reveals their romantic feelings for each other, beginning a relationship that will continue for some time. Shortly after, Charles Lee is formally recruited into Haytham's organisation, the Templar Order. This event surprises Desmond as he's watching, and he ejects himself from the Animus, attempting to absorb this new information. He then engages in a brief fight with his father, saying he is being treated as a pawn, and William strikes him out of anger. Once the tension has eased, Sean gives Desmond a choice: explore the Grand Temple or return to the Animus. The story then switches to the point of view of Raton Hekaton, Canetio's son by Haytham. After playing hide and seek with his childhood friends in the forest near his village, he encounters Charles Lee and his associates, who forcibly inform Raton Hekaton that they wish to speak with the village elders. Raton Hekaton is then knocked unconscious, and on his return to the village he discovers that it has been set ablaze. Though he is able to find his mother and attempts to free her from a collapsed structure, he is ultimately unable to save her, and she dies before his eyes. Some years later, a teenage Raton Hekaton is told by a village elder that the reason no one is allowed to leave the nearby village is that their purpose is to protect the Grand Temple. She then shows him a crystal-like sphere, which activates at his touch and allows him to communicate with Juno. Juno informs him that he and his village are guardians of the Grand Temple, and current probabilities indicate that unless he leaves, his village will be destroyed and his people slaughtered. After showing him the symbol of the assassins, she tells him to leave the valley, find Achilles Davenport, an assassin, and convince the elder embittered fighter to train him. After accomplishing this by protecting the Davenport Manor from bandits, Breton Hekaton adopts the name Connor on Achilles' suggestion, and the pair set off to collect supplies from Boston. There, Haytham attempts to frame his son for the events of the Boston Massacre, leaving Connor notorious in the city. He then meets Samuel Adams, who gives Connor advice on how to decrease his notoriety. On his return, Achilles presents Connor with the Aquila, a ship he can use to patrol the eastern American seaboard. As Connor learns the art of being an assassin, he is brought into the cities of Boston and New York, as well as a large open area called the Frontier. After being made a full-fledged member of the Assassin Brotherhood by Achilles, Connor sets out to eliminate the Colonial Templars. William Johnson is assassinated first after he attempts to purchase the land on which Connor's people reside. Next, Connor targets John Pitcairn, the leader of the British forces at Bunker and Breed's Hills. Connor then pursues Thomas Hickey, whom he discovers is plotting to assassinate George Washington. Connor finds Hickey, and after a brief scuffle, both are thrown into prison. However, Hickey isn't detained for long and is freed through Haytham and Lee's influence, while Connor is framed for the plot against Washington and is sentenced to death. Luckily, Achilles and his fellow assassins manage to free Connor at the execution. Connor then charges after Hickey and manages to assassinate him before the Templar can kill Washington. With Haytham, Lee, and Benjamin Church still at large, Connor fears they still plot to eliminate Washington. Connor meets with Washington, who informs him that Church has stolen goods vital to the Continental Army and has fled. Connor agrees to pursue him, and in the process meets his father, Haytham. Haytham reveals his own pursuit of Church, who has betrayed the Templars as well, and the two agree to set aside their differences and find Church together. Upon travelling to the Caribbean via the Aquila and pursuing Church's ship, Haytham and Connor locate Church and kill him, then return to the colonies to meet with Washington. Here, Haytham discovers a letter from Washington, ordering the removal of all indigenous tribes from the land, as a number of them support the British. One of the tribes to be removed is Connor's old tribe, despite their neutrality, and Connor severs his ties with Haytham and Washington as a result. He then takes off to protect his tribe's village from encroaching Patriot forces. On arriving, Connor finds his people to be safe, but also discovers that the clan mother has dispatched tribesmen to turn back the Continental troops sent to purge the village. Connor stopped his fellows from attacking the troops, but is forced to kill his closest childhood friend, who has been influenced by Charles Lee. Connor becomes torn in his mission to eliminate the Templars, believing he can turn his father to the assassin way of thinking. He then sets off to pursue Lee, who has been disgraced by Washington and taken refuge in Fort George. With the assistance of Lafayette, Connor has New York Harbor shelled to create a distraction and infiltrates the fort. However, he is ambushed by Haytham, who reveals that Lee has escaped with the medallion, and the pair engage in battle. Now accepting that his father will not be convinced, Connor kills Haytham. As Desmond plays these events out in the Animus, he is occasionally taken out in order to recover power cells crucial to exploring the Grand Temple, found in locations such as Manhattan and Brazil. During these trips, he encounters Daniel Cross, a Templar mole responsible for killing the modern-day Mentor and initiating a widespread purge of the Assassin Order. While exploring the temple, Desmond occasionally encounters Juno, who reveals the events that led up to the first cataclysm that scarred the Earth. During one of these lectures, Desmond reveals that Lucy's death by his hand was no accident, and that he chose to kill her after the Apple of Eden revealed she intended to take the apple to Abstergo Industries. When a third power cell is located in Cairo, Egypt, William offers to recover it, while Desmond continues to search Connor's memories for the key to the Grand Temple's inner barrier. However, William is captured by Abstergo and held in their Roman facility, the location where Desmond was kept when he was captured and forced to relive Altair's genetic memories. Through a video message, Warren Vidic demands Desmond bring the Apple of Eden to him in exchange for William. In response, Desmond infiltrates the laboratories, where he encounters Daniel again. As Daniel corners Desmond, the Templar begins to shuffle from the bleeding effect as a result of being raised in an animus and reliving the memories of his ancestors, Nikolai and Inokente Arelev, for extended periods of time. Daniel then flees from the room in a panic, with Desmond in pursuit. After a short chase, Desmond assassinates Daniel and confronts Vidic in his office, where he uses the apple to kill the Templar and his guards. Desmond then rescues William and uses the apple to lead them safely from the facility. Once he returns to the Animus, Desmond observes as Connor pursues Lee once more. After eavesdropping on a ship's captain to ascertain Lee's location, Connor chases Lee through a vessel under construction that has been set ablaze. The two come to a stalemate after falling through a section of the ship, and Connor is impaled at the waist by a broken piece of wood. Lee asks Connor why he continues to persist even though the Templar Order follows a cycle of their power waxing and waning. Connor replies, "Because no one else will," and shoots Lee in the chest, preventing the Templar from finishing him off. A badly wounded Lee then escapes across a nearby lake via a ferry, with an injured Connor in pursuit. Finally, Connor finds Lee in a pub, and the pair share a last drink before Connor stabs Lee lethally through the chest. Connor takes the medallion from Lee's body, and several months later, he returns to the tribe's village only to find they have moved elsewhere. He then locates the crystal sphere, presumably left behind for him to find. In the vision that it shows him, Juno reappears and instructs him to hide the medallion where no one else will find it. Connor does so, burying the medallion in the grave of Connor Davenport, Achilles' deceased son and his namesake. Now with the knowledge of the medallion's location, Desmond retrieves it and uses it to access the confines of the temple. Here, he and the others find Juno's apparition, who instructs Desmond to activate a pedestal which will save the world from the ongoing solar flares. However, Minerva's apparition suddenly appears and reveals that by doing as Juno says, Desmond will die and free Juno from captivity, allowing her to begin her conquest of the world. She explains that Juno was sealed long ago during the war between the first civilization and humanity, when she plotted to use the machines designed to save the world against it. Minerva, prodded by Juno, then shows Desmond that if the sun were to unleash its power to the world, he and a small collective of humans would survive to repopulate the world. He would become a religious icon in this new world, but his words would be mistranslated and lead the world to continue a perpetual cycle of destruction. Believing the world would stand a better chance fighting against Juno, Desmond instructs the others to leave and prepare for the oncoming struggle. Desmond then activates the pedestal, taking his life and saving the world. From there, Juno appears and tells Desmond that his part has ended and that her time has come. In an epilogue, Connor takes down the Templar portraits in the Davenport Manor's basement and burns them, signifying the end of his journey.
Using the DNA collected from Desmond Miles' corpse, Abstergo Entertainment developed an initiative called the Sample 17 Project to explore the genetic memories of Desmond's ancestors to gather material for the production of various Animus Omega products and feature films. The project was started with the ulterior motive of locating various precursor sites and pieces of Eden. In 2013, the company hired a research analyst for scouting the memories of one of Desmond's ancestors, Edward Kenway, a British privateer turned pirate, who later went on to become an assassin. In the early 1700s, after an attack on the ship he was aboard, Edward found himself stranded on a deserted island with an assassin. The man ran off into the jungle, after which Kenway chased him down and killed him. Among his possessions, he found a letter addressed to Duncan Walpole from the governor of Cuba, Loreno de Torres y Villela, promising him a reward for some maps he was carrying. Edward donned Walpole's robes, heard shots in the distance, and proceeded to investigate, leading him to a ship with its crew being held by British soldiers. Edward killed the soldiers and rescued a merchant named Steed Bonnet, later accompanying him to Havana. Having arrived in Havana, Edward, still posing as Walpole, met with Governor Torres and his associates, hoping to claim his reward. Edward learned of the existence of the Templar Order and a precursor site known as the Observatory, with the power to locate and monitor every person on Earth with a vial of blood. According to the old tales, the blood of a sage is required to enter the observatory. Afterwards, Edward was inducted into the Templar Order. Edward met with the Templars at the docks in the next morning to meet a sage named Bartholomew Roberts and escort him to the governor's mansion. During the journey to Torres' mansion, the group was attacked by assassins, allowing the sage to escape. Edward fought the assassins and managed to capture the sage. He later claimed his promised reward, but was unhappy with its quantity. Edward decided to free the sage and find out more about the observatory, hoping to make more money. However, as he snuck into Torres' mansion, he found his cell empty and scattered with dead bodies. While investigating the area, Edward was knocked out and identified as an imposter by the Templars. He was taken prisoner and locked up in one of the ships of the Spanish treasure fleet. Edward awoke to find himself in leg irons together with a fellow prisoner, Adewale. After freeing themselves, the men rescued the fleet's prisoners and stole a brig, which Edward decided to keep afterwards. He named his new ship the Jackdaw and made Adewale his quartermaster. Following this, the pirates set course for Nassau. After assembling a crew, he met Edward Thatch and Benjamin Hornigold, who took Edward out to sea to teach him how to plunder ships. He then met with James Kidd and devised a plan to rob a plantation. Edward and Thatch set out to acquire a galleon for Nassau's defence. The pirate assassinated its captain, the Templar Julian de Casse, and claimed his vessel for Nassau's defence and his island for himself. While exploring Edward's memories, the analyst was enlisted by IT head John Standish to hack computers secretly without Abstergo knowing. They hacked computers, animi, security cameras, and servers around Abstergo Entertainment's Montreal facility in order to obtain information on Abstergo's actions for the assassins, and pass it on to Rebecca Crane and Sean Hastings, who were routinely collecting it at Sean's coffee stand in the building's lobby, though the analyst wasn't originally aware of this. A few weeks later, Edward set course for Tulum, looking for Kidd, who was expecting him in the assassin hideout. Upon mentor Altabai's request, Edward navigated to a Mayan ruin to identify the return of a sage. Altabai absolved Edward of the deaths of his fellow assassins in Havana, but exiled him from Tulum. Edward devised a plan to find Roberts and earn some money by using Torres as bait. He set out to Kingston, where he planned to tail Torres and Lawrence Prinz, hoping to find the sage. He found Kidd trying to assassinate both men and stopped him, allowing them to escape. Edward then prepared to assassinate Prinz after having promised Kidd he would do so. Suddenly, Kidd removed his bandana and reddened his lips with his blood, revealing himself to be a woman named Mary Reed. Edward found Prinz and assassinated him, but Roberts appeared, holding Mary hostage. The sage managed to escape once again. While staying in Nassau, Edward witnessed the arrival of the Royal Navy and Woodes Rogers, who came to offer the king's pardon to all pirates, and Hornigold and his men decided to accept it. After learning that Commodore Peter Chamberlain planned to destroy all the pirate ships in Nassau's harbour, Edward assassinated him and escaped Nassau with Charles Vane. During a confrontation with the Royal Navy, Thatch was killed, and Edward barely managed to escape. He also learned of a ship called the Princess, aboard which he could find the sage. Edward and Vane went after a slave ship to find information about the princess, but due to Jack Rackham's mutiny, they were stranded on Isle Providentia. Edward was forced to deal with an insane Charles Vane, and managed to leave the island on a ship that had arrived. After retrieving his ship and crew from Rackham, Edward travelled to Kingston to learn more about the sage's location. Edward learned that Bartholomew Roberts could be found on the island of Principe. Edward assassinated Josiah Burgess and John Cochran, freeing pirates from a Portuguese camp along the way. With that, Edward finally gained the trust of Roberts, who in turn requested his aid. Edward met with Roberts to claim a set of vials from a Portuguese fleet. They managed to acquire the blood vials, and Edward was promised a chance to enter the observatory. When meeting up with Roberts again, Edward was directed to assassinate Hornigold, who had tailed him. Edward informed Adewale of his plan of selling the observatory for the highest price. Adewale suggested informing the assassins instead, so they could protect it, but Edward refused. Edward arrived at the observatory but was betrayed by Roberts and imprisoned in Port Royal. Present day. Eventually, the hacking activity was discovered at the same time that the company's chief creative officer, Olivier Garneau, went missing. In response, Olivier's stand-in, Melanie LeMay, reluctantly imprisoned the analyst and several other employees in bunkers in the basement, where they would continue their work until the hacker could be identified. Subsequently, John raised the analyst's security clearance so that they could leave the bunker, and instructed them to hack the main server in order to cover their tracks. Unbeknownst to the analyst, following John's instructions activated a program designed to transfer Juno's consciousness into another body. Unfortunately, Juno was not yet strong enough to maintain a physical form, and this aspect of the plan failed, much to John's rage. The analyst then resumed exploring Edward's memories. John then entered the analyst's bunker while they were using the Animus and revealed himself to be a sage, a reincarnation of Aita. He attempted to poison the analyst, weakening them enough that their body could host Juno. However, he was shortly caught and killed by Abstergo's security guards. The analyst later woke in Mulaney's office, where she apologized for imprisoning them. She claimed that while she originally believed them to be the hacker, information recovered from John's computer proved that he was responsible. After Melanie revealed the completed trailer for Devils of the Caribbean as a token of goodwill, the analyst was allowed to return to work. Edward was led into the trial of Mary Read and Anne Bonny. They warned that they're pregnant, so their executions are postponed. 4 months after the trial, Edward was locked in one of Port Royal's gibbets. Atebe freed Edward, returned his weapons, and requested his aid to free Mary and Anne. Along the way, Edward found Jack Rackham's skeletal corpse in a gibbet and a delirious Charles Vane in a cell. In a nearby cell, Anne shouted for help from the guards because Mary's gotten ill after childbirth. Edward helped Mary to reach outside, but she passed away. After suffering the loss of Mary, Edward tried to drown his sorrows, which resulted in a disturbing dream. Adewale woke Edward up on the beach afterwards. Edward then set sail for Tulum to meet with the assassins and make amends. After aiding the assassins with a Spanish invasion, Edward earned their trust. Edward, now allied with the assassins, set out to Kingston to assassinate Rogers. Then Edward sailed to Principe to kill Roberts. He attempted to assassinate Torres in Havana, but found his victim to be a decoy, El Tiburon. He killed him and set out for the observatory, where Torres would be. Edward began to make his way towards the observatory, freeing its guardians as he came across them and killing the Spanish soldiers. Edward found and assassinated Torres, returned the observatory to its dormant state, and received a letter learning of his wife's passing. Edward met with Atebe and Adewale at Great Inagua, awaiting the arrival of his daughter. He passed on his manor on Great Inagua to the assassins for their new base, and met his daughter, Jennifer Scott, for the first time. Edward then sailed to England with Jennifer. Sometime later, Edward remarried and conceived a son, Haytham Kenway. The post-credits scene shows Edward, Jennifer, and Haytham attending the Beggars' Opera at the Theatre Royal. In 2014, a Helix user explored the memories of a Templar in the service of Jacques de Molay. The memory takes place on 13th of October 1307 in the Temple in Paris, which was being attacked by the forces of King Philip the Fair. Alerted by the ensuing battle, Jacques tasked his advisor to hide the Sword of Eden and the Codex Pater Intellectus. Running through the battlefield, the advisor took notice of an assassin, Thomas de Cornelion. After a sword fight with Thomas, the advisor returned the sword and codex to their resting place in the temple. As the advisor left the room, he noticed Jacques had been captured. However, before he could rescue the Grand Master, the advisor was stopped by Thomas, who killed him with his hidden blade. 7 years later, Jacques and his affiliates were set to be burned at the stake. Before perishing, Jacques cursed the Pope and King overseeing his execution. With his death, the Templar Order was publicly disbanded. Suddenly, the memory was interrupted by the transmission of an assassin who introduced herself as Bishop. She explained to them that they were being manipulated by Abstergo to sift through memories, following which she asked them to experience an unsequenced set of Arno Dorian's memories as an introduction to the Assassins and Templars. In 1776, 8-year-old Arno accompanied his father, Charles Dorian, on a business trip in the Palace of Versailles. While waiting for his father on a chair, Arno saw a girl running away and followed her. After Arno stole an apple for her, the girl introduced herself as Elise de la Serre. Suddenly, a commotion was heard. Arno followed the crowd and found his father's body laid on the floor. Charles Dorian was assassinated, leaving his son an orphan under the care of Templar Grand Master Francois de la Serre. 13 years later, Arno was at de la Serre estate, performing chores when de la Serre left in a carriage. Then, an exhausted Templar messenger, Perrault, caught up to Arno, having a letter needed to be urgently delivered to de la Serre. Arno took the letter and chased after the carriage, but failed to deliver the message to Francois de la Serre. After sliding the letter under de la Serre's office door, Arno then learned of a party at the Palace of Versailles where Elise was. Arno put on a suit and infiltrated the palace to find Elise. After sharing a romantic moment with her, Arno and Elise were then interrupted by a guard, and Elise told Arno to leave. On his way out, Arno spotted de la Serre, who fell to the ground, dead. Charles Gabriel Savert came from behind a wall and then framed Arno for the murder. Arno was taken by the guards and subsequently imprisoned in the Bastille. Arno found himself in a cell with 4 other men. After his first night in prison, he saw one of the prisoners holding his father's watch and tried to take it back. The prisoner handed Arno a wooden training sword and the two duelled. Arno called his attention to a wall painted with unusual symbols. The prisoner acknowledged Arno's eagle vision and, after learning his surname, introduced himself as Pierre Bayek, revealing that his late father was an assassin before returning the watch and offering to train Arno. 2 months later, Bayek and Arno were still training, while a great commotion was taking place outside. The Bastille was stormed by revolutionaries, and Bayek and Arno took the opportunity to escape. Days later, he made his way to the de la Serre estate in search of Elise, who assumed he was responsible for her father's death. Elise handed Arno the letter he was supposed to deliver to her father, warning him of betrayal from someone within the Templar Order. After learning about his unwitting role in his stepfather's death, Arno decided to seek out the Assassin Brotherhood. After finding Bayek and meeting the Assassin Council, Arno was inducted into the Parisian Brotherhood of Assassins. Bishop then showed up and offered the user a chance to join the Assassins. Once they accepted, Bishop showed them footage of Abstergo's Phoenix project, explaining that the Templars were searching for sages both in the present and the past to map the precursor genome. As Arno had encountered a sage at some point during his lifetime, Bishop was hoping to have the initiate find the sage's remains before Abstergo, through Arno's memories. Bishop then allowed the initiate to proceed. Arno rendezvoused with Bayek on a rooftop near the concierge for his last exercise before becoming a fully fledged assassin, where he learned that Sévère would be at Notre Dame the next day. Arno was tasked with finding and assassinating Sévère. Arno infiltrated the church, entered the confessional impersonating Sévère's accomplice Deschenaux, and in order to gain information from Sévère. Having gained the necessary information, Arno thrust his arm through the lattice and stabbed Sévère in the throat with his hidden blade, killing the Templar. Arno then viewed Sévère's memories and learned the identity of his partner in crime on the night of de la Serre's murder, the Roi de Thun. Arno informed the Assassin Council of his discovery, where he was given the Phantom Blade and tasked with finding and assassinating the Roi de Thun. Arno left and investigated a commotion where he found a beggar having his foot forcibly amputated by the Roi de Thun's lieutenant, Aloy de Touche. Just as he was about to intervene, Donatien Alphonse Francois, Marquis de Sade, advised him against it, suggesting instead that Arno followed Latouche to his master. Arno found and interrogated him, discovering the hiding place of the Roi de Thun. Arno entered the sewers and started making his way towards the Roi de Thun. Arno managed to assassinate his target, and with the Roi de Thun dead, de Sade took over his position immediately. He then informed Arno that Francois Thomas Germain had crafted the pin used to kill Francois de la Serre. The council tasked Arno with investigating the silversmith, Germain. Arno infiltrated the workshop and found Germain, who claimed being held against his will for months. Arno escorted Germain outside, who admitted to Arno that he made the pin for a man named Tréchien Lafrenière. While investigating Lafrenière, Arno destroyed his gunpowder supply and discovered where to find his target. Arno arrived at the Holy Innocents Cemetery to assassinate Lafrenière, the man he believed to be responsible for Francois de la Serre's death. Arno assassinated Lafrenière, and through his memories he discovered that Lafrenière was planning to attack the Hôtel de Beauvais in force. Arno returned to the council and informed them of Lafreniere's involvement in the de la Serre murder. The council tasked Arno with finding and assassinating Lafrenière, but he informed them that he already did, much to their indignation. Although initially scolded for his assassination of Lafrenière, Arno was allowed to continue his investigation. Arno reached the hotel. By eavesdropping on a Templar meeting, he learned of a planned ambush on Elise. Arno reunited with Elise and rescued her from the Templar ambush. He then instructed her to meet him at the Café Théâtre. Arno met with Elise at the Café Théâtre and convinced her to join forces with the Brotherhood to find her father's killer. Elise was brought before the Assassin Council, although she was unable to land an agreement with them. While Mirabeau convened with the council, Elise informed Arno that Germain was exiled from the Templar Order for his radical views and heretical notion about Jacques de Molay. Investigating Germain's residence, they discovered him to be her father's killer. While planning to inform Mirabeau of Germain's true identity, Arno and Elise found him murdered. After an investigation, they deduced that the killer was likely an assassin. Arno followed the leader to the Sainte-Chapelle and discovered Mirabeau's killer to be Bayek. He had done this because he strongly believed that no peace could be achieved between the Assassins and the Templars, and that purging the Brotherhood to remake it into a stronger organization was a good thing. Bayek attempted to convince Arno to join his cause, but Arno refused, and forced into a duel, Arno reluctantly killed his former mentor. Arno met with the Assassin Council for his next assignment. The council learned that Mirabeau was in contact with the king and tasks Arno to find the letters he sent before they're made public. Arno infiltrated the Tuileries Palace, and while disposing of Mirabeau's correspondence with King Louis, Arno met artillery officer Napoleon Bonaparte. After escaping Tuileries with him, Arno was able to gain his assistance in tracking down Captain Frédéric Rouy. Arno reached the Grand Châtelet, where Rouy and his men were executing prisoners. Arno tracked down and assassinated Rouy. Through his memories, he learned of a Templar plot to starve France and incite riots, led by a woman named Marie Levesque. Arno met with Elise at Le Marais and informed her of Levesque's plan. Stealing a set of orders from the captain of a grain barge, he discovered that Levesque would be at Luxembourg Palace. Arnaud infiltrated the palace and assassinated Levesque. Through her memories, he learned of a plot to execute King Louis, undertaken by Louis-Michel Le Pelletier. Arnaud and Elise escaped the area in a hot air balloon. They then shared a night of passion. Seeking to find and kill Le Pelletier, Arnaud and Elise met with the Marquis de Sade at the Louvre, who informed them that Le Pelletier could be found at the Palais Royal. Arnaud tracked down and assassinated Le Pelletier. Through his memories, he learned that Germain would be present at King Louis's execution the following morning. At King Louis's execution, Arnaud met with Elise near the Palais de Révolution, intending to assassinate Germain. Louis XVI was executed, and Arnaud failed to assassinate Germain since he refused to let Elise take on the Grand Master's bodyguards alone. This caused her to question his devotion to avenging her father. As a result, she cut off contact with Arnaud. As Arnaud returned to the assassin hideout, he was stopped by two assassins and escorted to the council. Due to Arnaud defying orders to abandon Germain's investigation and his obsession for revenge, the council expelled Arnaud from the Brotherhood. Months later, he had moved back to the De La Serre estate in Versailles and returned drinking. While attempting to find his missing watch, Elise found him and convinced him to resume their mission. As Aloy Latouche hosted executions at the town square, Arnaud set out to rid Versailles of his terror over the town. Arnaud assassinated Latouche and, through his memories, he learned that Maximilien de Robespierre, leader of the Reign of Terror, was Germain's final conspirator. Arnaud and Elise drove back to Paris, seeking to find Germain through Robespierre at the Festival of Supreme Being. They managed to plant incriminating evidence on several people, discrediting Robespierre and turning popular opinion against him. Once Germain abandoned him, it would be easy to acquire information from Robespierre. Robespierre was arrested, but he broke free of his imprisonment and sought shelter in the last vestiges of his allies in France. Arnaud and Elise found and interrogated Robespierre, learning that Germain was hiding in the temple. Robespierre was arrested again and sent to be executed the following morning. Arnaud and Elise infiltrated the temple to find Germain. Upon Arnaud locating him, Germain used the Sword of Eden to fire a burst of electricity at him. After a fight at the temple's central tower, Germain fled to the catacombs. Arnaud entered the catacombs and found the entrance to the Templar vault. Elise then appeared and distracted Germain, allowing Arnaud to attack. Elise then fought Germain alone, but the sword's power was rendered unstable. The sword exploded, killing Elise and mortally wounding Germain in the process. In an act of grief, Arnaud slowly assassinated Germain by stabbing him in the throat with his hidden blade. In a vision following his death, Germain explained his struggle of being a sage and his beliefs in Delamay's and Elise's unfortunate deaths. As Germain finally succumbed to his wounds, Arnaud carried Elise's body out from the temple, leaving behind Germain's lifeless body inside. Sometime later, Arnaud, as a master assassin, walked through Paris and reflected on his own beliefs about the Creed not being a grant of permission to do as he would, but as a warning that everybody is responsible for their actions and its consequences. In 1808, Arnaud entered the temple once more, accompanied by Napoleon. There, they discovered Germain's corpse, which had long since decayed, and buried his skeletal remains in the catacombs of Paris. This left Bishop satisfied, as the bones would be difficult for Abstergo to locate, and were likely too degraded for DNA extraction anyway. Bishop praised the initiate for their work and promised to contact them again.
1868. London had fallen under the control of the Templar Grand Master Crawford Starrick, who controlled the city's vast industrial base and politicians through a network of lieutenants, keeping the Templars in power and oppressing the working classes. In 1868, controlling London meant controlling the British Empire. Henry Green, leader of the remaining assassins in the city, wrote to his friend George Westhouse to petition the Assassin Council of Crawley for aid. In Croydon, the Fry twins coordinated with Westhouse to remove the Templar threat of Rupert Ferris and David Brewster. While Jacob assassinated Ferris inside the steel foundry, Evie assassinated Brewster in his laboratory, but the piece of Eden she hoped to recover was destroyed. However, she learned that the Templars had already found a new one. The twins returned to Westhouse to report their accomplishments. Impatient to journey to London, the twins were scolded by the older assassin, claiming that the Templars were too strong to take on so soon. Fed up with waiting to strike at their enemies, Evie and Jacob defied the council's orders and travelled to London. When the twins arrived, they met with Henry. The Fry twins then began to disagree on the right course of action. Jacob wanted to form a gang called the Rooks to challenge the Templar-controlled gang Blighters and cripple Starrick's control, while Evie wanted to find the piece of Eden in his possession. The twins made alliances with Sergeant Frederick Aberline and Clara O'Day. Jacob and Evie set out to kill Blighter leader Rexford Kaylock and take over Whitechapel once and for all. With Kaylock dead, Whitechapel fell under the control of the Rooks. Jacob and Evie also acquired a broken rope launcher and a train that served as their new headquarters.
Henry took Evie and Jacob to meet Alexander Graham Bell, a scientist and inventor who would be able to repair the rope launcher. The twins also helped Bell set up an independent telegraph line to break Starrick's monopoly over the media. Back at the train, they made the acquaintance of Nett Winnett and began planning their next move. Jacob investigated the source of Starrick's soothing syrup, a cheap narcotic keeping London's poor district passive and under control. Aided by Charles Darwin, Jacob destroyed the distillery where the syrup was being produced and learned that its creator was John Elliotson. Jacob assassinated Elliotson, causing the Templars to take further note of his and Evie's actions in London. Meanwhile, Evie followed a lead on the Piece of Eden and recovered a book containing information on it. Following hidden information in the book, she and Henry later infiltrated the Kenway mansion to continue the research for the Piece of Eden. They learned that Edward Kenway had found a Shroud of Eden, which possessed powers of regeneration and healing, and had left clues to its location. Jacob then worked on ending Starrick's control of London's transport. He introduces himself to Pearl Attaway, a chief competitor to Starrick's omnibus company owned by Malcolm Milner, and reluctantly established a business partnership with her to destroy the Milner company. Jacob performed jobs for Attaway, such as stealing a set of internal combustion engines from the Milner company and then assassinating Milner. Jacob then learned that Attaway was Starrick's cousin and fellow Templar, and that she had manipulated him all along. Dismayed, Jacob assassinated Attaway and learned of another Templar plot. Starrick was devastated by the death of his cousin and ordered an increase in the Templar presence in the city. Meanwhile, Evie visited Lambeth, which was overrun with counterfeit tonics and medicine after Elliotson's death. Evie recovered medical supplies for the Lambeth Asylum, allowing Florence Nightingale to save an ill Clara and establish better medical care for the borough. Evie later searched for the Shroud of Eden at the Monument to the Great Fire of London. Although she found the key to the vault holding the shroud, she lost it to Lucy Thorne after a struggle with her. While Evie went after Thorne, Jacob targeted Starrick's financial interests. He met with Abeline, who was also investigating, and informed Jacob of a planned robbery of the Bank of England. Jacob uncovered the orchestrator of the robbery as Philip Twopenny and assassinated him before the robbery could take place. Evie visited Southwark, rescuing Edward Bailey from threats by the Blighters. Bailey, as the only omnibus manufacturer in London, informed her that after the downfall of their omnibus businesses, Attaway Transport and Milner Company, the Blighters were demanding that he work for them. Evie helped Bailey and his associates found the London General Omnibus Company, ending the Blighters' monopoly over the transport sector. Evie then infiltrated the Tower of London to find the Shroud of Eden. She crossed paths with Thorne and assassinated her, reclaiming the key in her possession. Jacob discovered a Templar plot to assassinate Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli. He rescued Disraeli and his wife Mary Ann from a group of thugs hired to attack the Disraelis. While Jacob was acting as a bodyguard for Mary Ann, she identified the man behind the attack as Earl of Cardigan. Jacob assassinated Cardigan at the Palace of Westminster, severely diminishing Starrick's political influence. After the death of Twopenny, Britain's economy was left in danger and counterfeiters had stolen printing plates from the Bank of England. Abeline had Evie recover the plates and return them to the bank, restoring faith in the economy and preventing a financial breakdown. Later, Evie and Henry set out to steal the plans for the vault holding the shroud, but were unsuccessful. Jacob received an invitation to meet with Maxwell Roth, the leader of the Blighters, who proposed an alliance against Starrick. He agreed despite Evie's warnings, and together they began to undermine Starrick's criminal and economic power throughout the city. Jacob helped Roth kidnap 3 of Starrick's important associates, but as they continued, Jacob grew perturbed by Roth's tactics. After Roth's attempt to destroy one of Starrick's workhouses with children inside, Jacob cut his ties with the crime boss. Roth then invited him to a performance at the Alhambra Music Hall. Aware of Roth's intentions, Jacob resolved to assassinate him. Once Jacob was inside the theatre, Roth set the place ablaze with the guests still inside. Jacob was able to assassinate Roth and escape the burning theatre, provoking Starrick to personally take action against the assassins and attempt to reinstate his control over London. After an argument over each other's methods, Jacob and Evie decided to kill Starrick and recover the shroud in one final mission, after which they would part ways. To do so, Jacob acquired invitations and a carriage for himself and Evie to the Queen's Ball at Buckingham Palace, and a Royal Guard uniform for Abeline, who could smuggle in weapons for them. Meanwhile, Evie drove to Dulop Singh and several politicians in exchange for learning that the plans to the Buckingham Palace crypt could be found in the White Drawing Room of Buckingham Palace. Jacob and Evie infiltrated the Queen's Ball to confront Starrick and secure the Shroud of Eden. However, Evie lost her precursor necklace to Starrick and ordered her brother to locate the crypt. Jacob made his way to the vault, finding Starrick wearing the shroud, but failed to attack him. Evie reached the vault and fought the Templar one-on-one, but the shroud prevented her from dealing much damage. Henry aligned and joined the fight, but he too was knocked off his feet by the Templar. Jacob and Evie continued the fight and managed to remove the shroud and end Starrick's life. With the Templar threat gone, the rift between the siblings was mended. Jacob returned the shroud to the vault as Evie attended to Henry. Shortly thereafter, the assassins met with Queen Victoria, who knighted them into the Order of the Sacred Garter for their efforts in saving her life. 2015. Bishop contacts the Helix Initiate to help herself and fellow assassins, Sean Hastings and Rebecca Crane, locate a piece of Eden in London. Through camera drones, the Initiate watches the pair of assassins conduct their fieldwork and download the memories of the twins Jacob and Evie Fry. Thanks to the Initiate's work, Sean, Rebecca, and Master Assassin Galina Voronina found the vault where the shroud had been stored. The Initiate then watches as the group of assassins engage Isabella Ardant and her escorts Juhani Otso Berg and Violet da Costa. During the struggle, Ardant is killed by Sean, but ultimately Violet manages to escape with the artifact. Despite the loss of the shroud, Bishop is confident that they will recover it in time and thanks the Initiates for their efforts. Bishop then sends them a final piece of footage from Abstergo's computers. Violet and Dr. Alvaro Grammatica discussing their plans for the shroud. Instead of cloning a member of the first civilization, they intend to recreate one from scratch using the shroud's cellular level healing ability. The footage then shows Violet talking to a woman, telling her that she's scared of what will happen to her if anyone found out what she was doing. The woman, revealed to be Juno, tells Violet not to worry, for Violet has played her part well, and that she will save the world. Egypt, 49 BCE. Set before the Assassin Brotherhood has been formed. Bayek is the name of a Medjay. His wife is named Aya, as they work to protect the people of the Ptolemaic kingdom during the time of widespread upheaval. The pharaoh, Ptolemy XIII, struggles to maintain his rule whilst harbouring ambitions of expanding his kingdom. His sister, the recently deposed Cleopatra, begins marshalling loyalist forces to launch a counter-coup against Ptolemy, and frequent incursions into the kingdom by the Roman Republic under the command of Julius Caesar lead to fears of an imminent invasion. Bayek's role as a Medjay brings him and Aya into contact with the secretive forces manipulating these events and into becoming the first hidden ones. Present day, Layla Hassan, a researcher at Abstergo Entertainment's Historical Research Division, is tasked with finding and retrieving an artifact in Egypt. However, she instead finds a tomb containing the mummies of ancient hidden ones Bayek and Aya. Hoping to find any relevant information that would secure her a position in the company's Animus project, Layla decides to relive both Bayek and Aya's genetic memories using her modified Animus without telling her superiors, despite Diana's protest. Bayek, being such a successful Medjay, has garnered the respect of his peers. He is in charge of protecting the Siwa Oasis, and one day he is abducted along with his son Kemu by a group of 5 masked men to an underground vault in the Temple of Amun. The masked men give Bayek a golden orb and demand that he use it to open a secret vault. Kemu helps Bayek escape, but during the struggle to kill one of the masked men, Bayek inadvertently stabs Kemu in the chest, killing him. 1 year later, in 48 BCE, Bayek had exiled himself from Siwa in order to track down the 5 masked men to take his revenge. He finds the first one, Rudjek, the Heron, and kills him. Bayek then returns to Siwa to kill the local priest, Medunamun, the Ibis, who has been torturing Siwans for information to open the same vault. Bayek then heads for Alexandria, where Aya has been tracking another of the masked men. Upon meeting Aya, she reveals that she has already killed the vulture and the ram, leaving only one target left, the snake. Aya also reveals that she has been working with Apollodorus and Cleopatra to uncover the snake's identity. She gives Bayek the very first hidden blade. Bayek discovers that the snake is Iordaros, the royal scribe, and tracks him to a bathhouse. Bayek kills Iordaros with the hidden blade at the cost of his own left ring finger, cut off by the same blade. Bayek remembers Eudorus' words and begins to have doubts. He decides to meet with Apollodorus and Cleopatra for answers. Cleopatra tells Bayek that she was ousted from the throne by the masked men, who call themselves the Order of the Ancients, and seek to control all of Egypt by using Ptolemy as their puppet. In addition, there are more members of the Order than the 5 Bayek and Aya had already killed: the Scarab, the Hyena, the Lizard, and the Crocodile. In fact, Eudorus was actually the Hippo, and the name of the Snake is used to refer to the Order as a whole. Confronted with this new information, Bayek agrees to become Cleopatra's Medjay and assassinate the remaining members of the Order. Bayek eventually tracks down and kills all of them, while Aya convinces Pompey the Great to ally with Cleopatra. Back in the present, Layla and Diana are attacked by Abstergo's paramilitary task force, Sigma Team, for failing to check in with the company. Layla is able to kill her attackers, but Diana is captured and presumably executed. Swearing revenge, Layla returns to the Animus, determined to complete her mission. Bayek receives a letter from Aya explaining that there are 2 more members of the Order, the Scorpion and the Jackal, who are members of Ptolemy's royal guard and the likely culprits responsible for Kemu's death. He finds out that Lucius Septimius is the Jackal and tracks him, but is too late to stop him from assassinating Pompey. With no other options, Cleopatra has Bayek and Aya help sneak her into the palace in order to meet Julius Caesar. Cleopatra is able to impress Caesar and secure his support. Bayek manages to kill Pothinus, the Scorpion, but is stopped from killing Septimus by Caesar, while Aya watches as Ptolemy is eaten by crocodiles as he tries to flee across the Nile. After the end of the civil war, Cleopatra takes the throne as pharaoh. Septimius becomes an advisor to Caesar, and Cleopatra cuts ties with Bayek and Aya. Bayek and his supporters realize that Cleopatra and Caesar have now allied themselves with the Order. Regretting his mistake in supporting Cleopatra, Bayek gathers all of the allies he has made and decides to form a brotherhood to counter the Order and defend the free will of the common people. Bayek and Aya recall the great interest the Order showed in the tomb of Alexander the Great, and they go to investigate. There, they find a mortally wounded Apollodorus, who warns them that Caesar's lieutenant, Flavius Metellus, is the Lion and the true leader of the Order. He and Septimius had taken the orb and Alexander's personal Staff of Eden from the tomb and are heading back to Siwa for the vault. Upon returning to Siwa, they find the vault already opened. Bayek tracks down and confronts Flavius, who now bears the activated Apple of Eden, but Bayek is able to defeat and kill him, finally avenging Kemu's death. Bayek then returns to Aya, who has recruited Marcus Junius Brutus and Gaius Cassius Longinus to their cause. She plans to head to Rome with Brutus and Cassius to assassinate Caesar and Septimius. Sundered by their paths of blood and shadow and hallowed by the death of their child, Bayek and Aya decide finally to part ways, but cement the foundation of the Hidden Ones when they both swear to fight from the shadows to protect the world. As they part, Bayek discards the eagle's skull charm, a necklace of Kemu's. Aya picks it up and notices the impression it leaves in the sand, the icon of the new Brotherhood. Layla wakes up from the Animus to find William Miles, present-day mentor of the Assassin Brotherhood, watching over her. She accepts William's offer to work with the Assassins, but stops short of actually joining them as a member, and the two depart for Alexandria. In Rome, Aya confronts Septimius, who wields the Staff of Eden, and she defeats and kills him. She then infiltrates the theatre of Pompey and assassinates Caesar with the aid of the members of the Roman Senate. Later, she meets with Cleopatra and warns her to be a fair ruler or she will return to assassinate her. Afterwards, Bayek and Aya, now calling herself Amunet, begin recruiting and training apprentices as they build the Hidden Ones in Egypt and Rome.
Odyssey's story begins in 480 BC, where King Leonidas leads the Spartan army against a Persian charge during the Battle of Thermopylae. The skirmish is won, but Leonidas is informed by a captured enemy that the Persian army has learned of the mountain path and will surround the Spartans by morning. Nevertheless, Leonidas resolves to hold off the Persian advance. In 2018, Layla Hassan recovers Leonidas' spear and extracts from it the DNA of his grandchildren, Alexios and Cassandra, to be used for her animus to find the location of the staff of Hermes Trismegistus. Whichever sibling is selected by the player, and therefore by Layla, is designated as the Eagle Bearer. In 431 BC, at the onset of the Peloponnesian War, the Eagle Bearer is hired by a mysterious merchant named Elpenor to assassinate the Wolf of Sparta in the polis of Megaris, and departs Kepalonia after befriending a naval captain named Barnabas, and assuming command of his ship, the Adrestia. In Megaris, the Eagle Bearer learns that the Wolf of Sparta is in fact the sobriquet of Nikolaos, that Nikolaos is not in fact their biological father, and has another adopted son, Stentor, and that their mother Myrene left Nikolaos and Sparta shortly after the incident at Mount Taygetos. The Eagle Bearer travels to Pokis to confront Elpenor, who reveals himself to be a member of the cult of Cosmos, and is aware of their lineage as the grandchild of Leonidas. Disguised with Elpenor's mask and robes after killing him, the Eagle Bearer infiltrates a secret cult meeting in Delphi, where they discover the cult is targeting their family, and that their younger sibling had survived the fall from Mount Taygetos, but has been manipulated by the cult into becoming their champion, known as Deimos. Accompanied by Barnabas and Herodotus, the Eagle Bearer embarks on an extended journey across the Greek world, and eventually reunites with Myrene, who had assumed the alias of Phoenix as the oligarch of the polis of Naxos. Myrene persuades her eldest child to convince the Spartan regime to reinstate their citizenship and ancestral estate, and they continue undermining the cult's activities in the Greek world together. The Eagle Bearer later encounters and fights Deimos at the Battle of Pylos, but is captured and taken to Athens, where the cultist Cleon enjoys popularity as leader of the city-state, following the death of his rival Pericles years prior. The Eagle Bearer escapes captivity and thwarts Cleon's plans, with the help of their Athenian allies. The Eagle Bearer later joins Brasidas' Spartan forces in confronting Cleon's Athenian army at the Battle of Amphipolis, where the leaders of both armies die in battle, thus heralding the end of the first half of the Peloponnesian War. Afterwards, the Eagle Bearer returns with Myrene to Mount Taygetos to confront Deimos. Depending on key decisions made by the player at predetermined points of the game's narrative, the Eagle Bearer either redeems or kills Deimos, and their actions also have a direct bearing on the fates of their extended family members, and determines whether they will have a successful family reunion for the main plotline's epilogue. After eliminating the cult, the Eagle Bearer returns to their sanctuary in Delphi, where they find the cult's pyramid-shaped artifact and Aspasia, who reveals herself to be the cult's original leader. Disgusted by what the cult had become under Deimos' influence, Aspasia secretly helped the Eagle Bearer dismantle it, so that its original ideals of peace through order may survive. After touching the artifact and receiving visions of future conflicts, the Eagle Bearer destroys it and decides Aspasia's fate. At some point during their lifetime, the Eagle Bearer also meets their biological father Pythagoras, who is revealed to be a descendant of the Isu like Myrene and Leonidas, and inherits the staff of Hermes from Pythagoras to safeguard the secrets of Atlantis, gaining biological immortality in the process. In the present, Layla encounters the Eagle Bearer in Atlantis, who warns her that the world needs balance between the Assassins' and Templars' ideals. Either side prevailing over the other will result in the world's doom. Layla also learns that she is the prophesied one who will bring balance between the concepts of chaos and order. The Eagle Bearer gives Layla the staff before passing away. In 855 CE in Norway, a young Eivor witnesses warlord Kjotve the Cruel sacking her hometown and killing her parents before she is rescued by Sigurd, son of King Styrbjorn of the Raven clan. 17 years later, Eivor has been adopted by Styrbjorn and pursues vengeance against Kjotve. Her latest attempt fails, but she recovers her father's axe. Touching it, Eivor experiences a vision of Odin, leading her to consult the local seeress, Valka. Valka induces another vision of Sigurd, losing an arm before being consumed by a giant wolf. In 2020, the unexplained strengthening of Earth's magnetic field negatively affects the planet. Layla Hassan, Sean Hastings, and Rebecca Crane receive a signal with coordinates in New England, where they exhume a Viking raider's remains. Lila, struggling with the staff of Hermes Trismegistus's influence, enters the Animus to view the raider's memories. Sigurd returns from an expedition with foreigners Basim and Hytham, members of the Hidden Ones, who came to Norway to assassinate Kjotve, a member of the opposing Order of the Ancients. Defying Styrbjorn's orders, Eivor and Sigurd enlist King Harald's help to eliminate Kjotve. Following their victory, Harald declares his intention to unite Norway under his rule. Styrbjorn pledges fealty to Harald, angering Sigurd, who expected to inherit the crown. He and Eivor take loyalists in the clan on an exodus to England, establishing the settlement of Ravensthorpe. Eivor then secures alliances with neighboring Saxon kingdoms and Viking clans. Eivor's visions continue. Valka gives her an elixir that makes her dream of Asgard from Odin's perspective. Hoping to avert his own fated death during Ragnarok, Odin imprisons Loki's son Fenrir, who is foretold to kill him, and retrieves a magical mead from Jotunheim that will allow him and the other Aesir to be reincarnated. Layla realizes these are actually visions of the Isu shortly before the Great Catastrophe, and that Loki, who was forbidden to reincarnate himself after betraying Odin, found another way to ensure his survival. Sigurd and Basim discover an Isu relic, and Sigurd, with Basim's encouragement, comes to believe himself a god. Fulk, an Order agent and servant of King Alfred of Wessex, captures Sigurd, believing him to be an Isu or descendant thereof, and tortures him, removing his right arm. Eivor rallies her allies to kill Fulki and rescue Sigurd, who has also begun experiencing strange visions. Eivor later accompanies Sigurd back to Norway to investigate his visions, finding an Isu temple with a tree-shaped computer system. The siblings connect themselves to it and are seemingly transported to Valhalla, where they enjoy endless battles, until Eivor realizes it is just a simulation. Having become disillusioned with the pursuit of glory, Eivor persuades Sigurd to return to the real world, and escapes the simulation after resisting Odin. Upon awakening, Eivor is confronted by Basim, who reveals himself, Eivor and Sigurd, to be reincarnations of Loki, Odin, and Tyr, respectively. Having been overtaken by Loki's personality, Basim attacks Eivor, but is defeated and trapped in the simulation. Sigurd then abdicates leadership of the clan to Eivor, who returns to England. Later, Eivor and her allies join Guthrum's assault on Wessex, defeating Alfred's forces at the Battle of Chippenham. Eivor tracks down Alfred, who reveals himself as both the leader of the Order and the poor fellow soldier of Christ. Disgusted by the Order's heresy against Christianity, Alfred sought to replace it with a new God-fearing order. Eivor spares Alfred and returns to Ravensthorpe to a hero's welcome. In the present, the assassins deduce the strengthening magnetic field is a result of Desmond Miles's activation of the Isu Towers in 2012. To stabilize the field, Layla travels to the Norway Temple and enters the simulation. She meets Basim, who reveals that he led the assassins to Eivor and tells her how to stabilize the magnetic field. She does so, but this releases Basim and traps Layla in the simulation. Layla encounters a being called the Reader and decides to work with him to prevent future disasters, allowing her mortal body to die. Meanwhile, Basim escapes the temple with the Staff of Hermes. After they leave to bring William Miles, Basim enters the Animus to track down Loki's missing children. Following the events of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, the last chapter, the modern-day assassins use a blood sample provided by Basim ibn Ishaq to relive his memories during the age of the Abbasid Caliphate. In 861 CE, Basim is a young street thief living in Anbar, with his childhood friend and companion, Nihal. For his entire life, Basim has been haunted by visions of a monstrous genie, which Nihal had been helping him cope with. While just a simple thief, Basim has greater aspirations and attempts to join the Hidden Ones, but is flatly rejected by the senior Hidden One stationed in Anbar, Roshan bint Lahad. In an effort to prove himself, Basim sneaks into the Caliph's palace to steal a chest sought by both the Hidden Ones and the Order of the Ancients. Basim retrieves a disc-shaped artifact from the chest, which displays a holographic message, before he is confronted by the Caliph, Al-Mutawakkil. Nihal kills the Caliph to save Basim, and they both flee the palace. In retaliation for the Caliph's murder, the guards begin slaughtering all thieves in Anbar, including many of Basim's friends, and he angrily blames Nihal before parting ways. Now on the run, Basim manages to escape the city with Roshan's help, and she takes him to the Hidden One's mountain fortress at Alamut. Over the next few years, Basim trains under Roshan and is eventually initiated into the Hidden Ones. When their mentor, Rayhan, learns of the Order's rapidly expanding influence in Baghdad, he decides to send a contingent of Hidden Ones to the city to investigate, led by Basim and Roshan. Upon arriving in Baghdad, Basim learns that 5 Order members have infiltrated the Caliphate's highest levels of power and are exploiting it in order to excavate or rebuild ancient Isu artifacts. He proceeds to hunt down 4 of the Order members, assassinating them and foiling their respective plots. During this time, Nihal, who is distrustful of the Hidden Ones, encourages Basim to investigate the artifacts the Order is looking for, believing they are both somehow linked to them. Eventually, Basim confronts the Order's leader Kabiha, who claims that the answers he seeks lie in an Isu temple underneath Alamut. Kabiha then tries to convince Basim to accompany her to the temple, but is killed by Roshan, who warns Basim not to investigate any further. Disobeying Roshan, Basim travels to Alamut with Nehal, only to find the fortress under siege by the Order's forces. Basim rescues many captured Hidden Ones and rallies them to fight off the attack, while he heads to the temple after convincing Rayhan that the power held within could be used to defeat the Order for good. However, he is confronted by Roshan, who reveals that she is aware of Basim's true nature and attempts to stop him from entering the temple, fearing what it may awaken within Basim. Basim defeats Roshan, but spares her life and enters the temple with Nehal. Inside, he finds more disc-shaped artifacts and discovers that the temple used to be a prison where the Isu Loki was held in at some point before escaping. Basim also realizes that Nehal never existed. Both she and the Jinni were in fact representations of his repressed memories as Loki. Deciding to embrace his nature as Loki's reincarnation, Basim fuses with Nehal and regains his memories. Upon leaving the temple, Basim is welcomed back into the Hidden Ones, which causes Roshan to resign in protest. Now fully aware of his past life as Loki, Basim muses that he has been reborn in a new world, and looks forward to a reunion with those who were responsible for his imprisonment.